you on what is happening at the moment.
Thank you. Thanks for coming this horrible evening. It's about the third time we've tried to have this meeting. I don't want to spend too long because we've already started a bit late, but the agenda will be updates since our last meeting and what we can do. I just want to get that out of the way before the end of the night. Our first guest speaker was supposed to be Jim Wilmot, but he's actually being delayed in a traffic accident, but he's on his way now. We've then got Professor G.P. Foster, who might go on after Connie. Do you want to go first, Connie? And then Trevor Holt, Australian Advocacy Group, and then we're going to have some legal discussions. The lawyer who was supposed to be here hasn't been able to make it as well, so we've got Hugh Carter, who's Malcolm Ross, who's offered to step in and help us out, so that'd be great. And then we'll finish off with another I don't think that one should be there, sorry. And then we're going to go to Q&A. So updates since the last meeting. We've had confirmation from the Department of Environment saying they did contaminate Dawson Creek and the South Pine River. They were only, not even fined, they were given $20,000 worth of studies to be conducted, which I'll talk about that in a second. We've had some significant changes to our chemical permits. Dr. Connie Turney will be talking about that. We also now have Australian Advocacy Group. Trevor will be talking about that. And since Cyclone Alfred, you might have all seen a lot of stuff in the news about grafting fire ants in all the floodwaters. So they're trying to say that fire ants are going to spread even more, but generally only within those areas that are already heavily infested. So I think there's a lot of fear mongering going on at the moment. And what they're failing to mention in the news is all the chemicals that have now been washed into our waterways because of those flooding events. There's a group called Pesticide Action Group that Trevor will be talking more about. Many of you would have seen as well, we recently had our first ever arrest, and it happened to be a local resident here in Samford. So we seem to be getting a lot of firsts in Samford. It went viral on social media, and a current affair took up the story, which many of you might have seen last week. And since then we've done multiple rallies and talks, raising awareness about this crucial issue, and there seems to be more residents than ever waking up to the threats to their property rights. So I got an email from the Department of Environment recently. It's taken them 7 months to get back to me. It says there was the accidental dispersal of treatment product and it wasn't compliant with the Environmental Protection Act. The department concluded it is satisfied with the programme and that it's adjusted its procedures and processes to reduce the likelihood of reoccurrence. And they are going to invest into a suitable local environmental project to offset the matters that arose as a result of the accidental dispersal. I wasn't happy with that, so I wrote back to them and said, well, can you tell me exactly what those suitable environmental projects are? So move on to the next one. So then they wrote back to me and said a range of projects. Whilst they do not have final figures, the cost of the project delivery apparently is far in excess of penalty infringement notices, which combined are in order of $20,000. When fines are imposed, they are paid into consolidated revenue. When making enforcement decisions, particularly about a government agency, it's appropriate to consider in the decision how the public interest will be best served. So this is just totally inadequate. I mean, if a mining company had done this, the penalty would have been much harsher than $20,000. They've already fined some trucks with turf going across the New South Wales border for $60,000, and they've told us individuals that we could be fined up to $16,000 just for saying we don't want this on our property. So they just get $20,000 for dumping toxic chemicals into Dawson Creek and South Pine River. Anyway, we'll move on. So, has everyone here seen the videos of the... Has anyone here not seen the videos? Okay, there's a few. Well, did you press the phone button and go?
Poison grounds while there's still cattle in the paddock.
So do you think this rash is from the fire ant treatment?
Yeah. There's been 3 police officers here and they've got the owner in handcuffs.
Fire ants are one of the world's most invasive pests.
We all want to get rid of fire ants, but we want the choice of how we do it.
These residents are firing back against the war on fire ants, claiming the real invasion isn't the ants.
So this is an absolute waste of taxpayers' money.
I won't be letting them in without a fight.
Hey!
That was the character.
Well said.
And this was the video I took of the actual arrest. I'll just...
Obstruct me in this arrest, you will be arrested.
Okay, you're obstructing police. They need you here today. Please don't. She's not complying. We've given her directions to comply. She's obstructing him. She's obstructing us now.
And I'm asking here, who has the authority to deem that excuse reasonable? She's allowed to obstruct with a reasonable excuse.
Not when she starts threatening.
But how do you obstruct them peacefully when you've got these people turning up like this? How are we supposed to lawfully obstruct under section 336? Who gets to deem the reasonable excuse, officer? Officer, who has the right to deem that reasonable excuse? Is it biosecurity? I'm just asking, because you're
She's about a direction.
but she might not be if it's a...
What you want? I'm a police officer, that's my job. You can go and upset
Well, tell them to leave then. They're the ones upsetting the peace. Well, that's what we're saying here, and they put you in the car.
Do you wish to make any formal complaints? You're more than welcome.
We will be making formal complaints.
That's fine.
How is she being given the right to appeal? She's in a police car right now. Legal right.
There you go. What occurred today, I'll be honest, I'm happy with the process that occurred today in relation to my involvement.
As you can see, they were very pleased with themselves about this, but I don't think they will be once they've dealt with us. So, yeah, this was a pretty sad day in Queensland, I think, to see that happen. And, you know, we're doing everything we can now to support that resident and help her through this, because it will go to trial. We're not going to back down.
No.
So yeah, there's been plenty of injured dogs since the program started. 2 of those dogs on that screen actually died. We're seeing sick animals still being reported. There's Trevor there, he'll talk a bit more about that. And keep going. So just quickly, funding for the current program. We were hoping with the change to the LNP state government that we would have a change in direction with this. But then Tony Perrott would still have us believe that spending $593 million allocated from the Commonwealth until 2027 will help still eradicate these fire ants by 2032 Olympics. And to this date, the program's had over $1 billion thrown at it. The new LNP government has also pledged a further $24 million to the program to do more aerial baiting, and they said they will not conduct a review of the programme until 2027, which is when this current budget runs out, which is very convenient. This ignores our signatures, 3,200 on our parliamentary petition that was tabled on the 18th of February. So they are just, they're not listening still. 90% of that funding comes from the Commonwealth if we call it eradication. So they're still pushing ahead with saying they're eradicating ants. Our next speaker has an amazing graph that he'll show you, but he's not here at the moment. And they're still continuing to blanket 850,000 hectares of land, which is over 2 million acres, 6 times with these chemical pesticides. I've called my group Fire Ant Treatment Alternatives because I believe there are safer alternatives. We have Professor Joshua King's hot water machine that Trevor will talk to you about. There's people who are having much success with orange oil, diatomaceous earth, and I recently came across a study that says artificial sweeteners lead to fire ants to a bitter end. So if they can kill a little ant, what are they doing to us? Anyway, that's quite promising. I've got plenty of concerns with the programme. You've heard many of them in my previous meetings. The biggest one is there's no comprehensive risk assessment, environmental risk assessment, which is the first thing that should have been done before they started doing what they're doing here. Breaches of permits, water contamination, harm to pets, mental health especially is suffering at the moment with all these men turning up onto properties where women are home alone. Government overreach. Organic farming is at risk here because they've changed the notices to allow these chemicals used on organic farms. Safety of the chemicals, bullying, propaganda, fear campaign, and all the threats of the fines, and now we've had an arrest. So, yeah, there's lots of concerns. What do we want? We want an immediate halt to the blanket spreading of toxic insecticides, especially aerially. We wanted to commission an independent environmental risk assessment. We wanted to review all adverse event reports concerning pets, livestock and people. We want to consult and negotiate appropriate treatments for communities and individuals and stop threatening people. Only treat areas with known infestations because there are no fire ants in Samford. Identify and approve alternative treatments, prevent the spread by properly monitoring the movement of restricted materials. We will never get rid of fire ants because on a daily basis you've got mulch, soil, turf and hay coming from areas like Logan. And empower landowners through education and encourage self-treatment. What can we do? Just quickly, send a notice to biosecurity. I sent a letter of demand back in October last year. I still haven't heard back, but at least it shows we're not happy. You can try to negotiate community treatment plans, which is what I think we need to do, and Jim will talk a bit more about that. You must lodge any adverse event you have after treatment if you feel there's a problem, because people are just brushing it off and going, oh, it's just a coincidence, but you must lodge every single reaction. We have a new GoFundMe that we've set up called Halt the Fire Ant Programme, which is helping to support the legal costs involved in this case coming up, and it's really important we show our residents that we're supporting them. Contact your Member of Parliament and follow our Facebook pages for Fire Ant Treatment Alternatives. What can you do individually right now? Every time you get a notice in your mailbox, send them a letter back saying you object, because they're relying on just 1% of people objecting. We've got no trespass signs, no poison zone signs. They seem to work for the first few visits, but then when they turn up with the police, you can see what happened there. We've got biosecurity checklists, they might delay entry a bit. Required compliance with the permits. There's a really good dialogue online that you can talk to them about. And yeah, just send legal notices setting out your reasonable excuses. And I think that's me, isn't it? Yep, that's me. I won't be talking anymore other than at the Q&A. So thanks for listening, and I will bring on Connie Turney.
Okay, I'm Dr. Connie. I want to just say there's so many things wrong with spraying this almost absolute area, and I want to discuss some of the reasons. So the first one is when they first started in 2022, I had my asthma sprayed on my property without me even knowing, and I looked at the permits. The permits are made out by the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medical Association. And for asthmasoprene, that was the permit PER 90213. And it said in the permit, do not apply if fire ant populations are not evident and no longer evident. Now, that was all I needed. So when they came, I told them they can't spray on my place. When they came on the road, I had the permit printed. I went out and said, you can't spray here. They then said to me, but we don't know if there's fire ants, therefore we can spray. Yeah, absolute bullshit. I complained to the APVMA, and they said, oh yeah, we take that very seriously. I complained when they sprayed in the creek. I complained to the fire people and as well to the APVMA. And I think it's very important that if they do something wrong against the permit, you need to complain, because they need to see that there are, first of all, that there are adverse events, and secondly, that they go against the permit. You need to tell them. Because they can't hide that. They're trying, but they can't. So they haven't sprayed my place since then because I complained with the permit. They then, in 2024, took that sentence out. So now it says, do not apply where threatened invertebrate species and or threatened ecological communities are present, except in the fire and eradication zone. So that means over these 830 or 850 elected data I got from them was 830,000 hectares. In this pristine land, we can spray. It doesn't matter whether we kill the threatened insect or harm the ecological environment. So my question is, where's the threatened Species Council? Why haven't we informed them? We should. The next one. So something changed with the new permit. I think we complained too much as well. So now they actually say for pyriproxyfen, which is the one they spray here, do not apply as a preventative measure for the red fire ant control. That means if they come on your place and you have no fire ant, it's preventive measure. They're going against the permit. So you need to print out this permit and stand in front of them and say, you're breaching your permit. Now, I told them, if you breach it, you can't breach the permit. They threatened me with money and everything as well. And I went back to them and said, don't bully me. You can't breach your permit, and I can't breach it, let you breach your permit on my property, because that makes me responsible as well. So, and somehow that worked. So, the second thing is that this is a minor use permit, and for the use and supply of an unregistered active chemical. So what does that mean? The use of a minor use means that the use does not occur across the whole industry, but is only confined to limited segments and used infrequently or sporadically. Well, they're not using this infrequently because they're spraying 4 times a year espresso cream and 6 times a year pyriproxyfen. So next one. So limited use means this definition comes from the ADVMA. It's on their website. 10% of total area of crop, number of animals, or area of situation. So for us, that would be area of situation. 10%. They're spraying everything. Or 10,000 hectare. We're spraying 850,000 hectare. So how can that be? How can that be allowed? Okay, next one. So what happens when they actually spray if there's no fire ants? So in 2001, we had 1 nest. And apparently, and this is their data, it was there for, the fire ants were there already for 15 years. We didn't even know they were there. It's such a big impact. And then I looked in November 2024, they actually have a website where they show you where all the fire ants are, and I counted the nests, and there were 7,975 nests. So we're going from 1 nest to 17,975 nests in an area of 850,000 hectares. So, and the shocking point is that we actually knew this would happen. Because in Florida, they had this experience, and they said, you cannot get rid or eliminate fire ants at all. So, and their conclusion was that they have actually harmed the environment, and the only way to actually eliminate it is by biological control. They're at the moment looking at a fly that lays the eggs in the fire ant heads. So, next one. So, but what will happen when you spray land? So you get actually rid of all the predators and competitors for space, and it makes it easier for the fire ant to invade. And you're killing all the ants, well, maybe not all of them, but many species. I don't know if you know, but we have 1,275 ant species. And ants are a vital component for the environment. They aerate and turn the soil over, disperse and germinate seeds, consume organic matter, and provide food for other organisms, such as ant-eater, and control pest population. So, but it doesn't only affect insects. So what this growth regulator does, it mimics the insect juvenile hormone, and that disturbs the development, and that prevents the larvae from becoming an adult. But in vertebrates, it mimics the action of the retinoic acid, and it blocks the retinoic acid to bind to its receptors. And the receptor then can't initiate gene expression, which helps in the induction of differentiation. So basically, the cell has to differentiate in different organs, in different limbs, and that's not happening when they block it. And that is why we see frogs with no limbs. So it is in the literature. So I just quote in the literature here. It's also cytotoxic. So it's found that in mice, it damages the testicular architecture, interfering with spermatogenesis. Pyriproxyfen is strongly cytotoxic to the liver cells, and that is not only in animals, but in humans as well. And on the label, it actually states that toxicity level for human health, there's blood toxicant and endocrine issues. But what is even worse is, okay, we have the products, But if they degrade, these degraded products are actually worse than the product itself, and they last for at least 60 days in the environment. So they're even more toxic than the regulators. They're toxic to enzymes in the soil. They're bacteria in the soil and earthworms. Some degraded products of polytoxafen are classed as toxic and very toxic. So then we have the bioaccumulation. So growth regulators accumulate in animals. They were feeding chicken and cows, and they found that it discovered that it is accumulating in the tissue, and it gets into the eggs with chicken and into the milk with cattle. It accumulates in fish, and it's generally toxic, very toxic to aquatic insects and fish. Well, fish don't die, but insects. So this means that it will biomagnify, which means basically that it will go up the food chain, and we will see frogs and birds and mammals affected. So then we have resistance. They haven't even talked about that. So like, I'm sure you all heard about antibiotic resistance and how bad that is. Well, it's the same story here. If you spread something over a vast area and affect everything, then there will be resistance developing, especially if you do it on a continuous basis. And we have seen this already. So in Australia, they use polytoxafen to control the white fly on cotton, and they have found resistance by this overuse. So we know this is happening. The problem is that it's not only resistant to this chemical, like a growth regulator, but you can also get cross-resistant to other chemicals. And that will be a major disaster for our agriculture if they can't control the pest anymore. So, yeah, so that's another, and I think I'm coming to the end here. Next one. So, the summary is basically, I can't do that. The growth regulators are not only toxic to the insects, but also amphibian and mammals, and to the soil and its habitat, and to the water and its habitat. So if we think that we will not get affected, we're kidding ourselves. Because if it's in the food chain, we will eventually get affected as well. And if we believe that what the government tells us is safe, then we have not paid attention.
Thank you, Connie. We really appreciate you making the journey all the way out here to give us all your unbelievable research, and you're an amazing person. Thank you. We're just about to get Gigi Foster up on the worst tech you can ever imagine.
I'm getting messages on her phone from Gerald Rennick.
What's he saying?
I don't know. I can't see it. My face is. Might be able to.
In between, I'll have a little chat. So that's really quite incredible what you've just heard in regards to what they're actually doing to us. When they first came to Samford and we were looking at their permits, Sarah and I and a couple of other people used to chase them out of the property because we would show them the permits that they were breaching. Not long after, it would only take a couple of weeks, and they decided, okay, let's change the permit because these people are actually right. We are breaching our permits. So That's when they decided, let's change the permit and let's keep doing what they needed to do. And in the meantime, they poisoned Dawson Creek and then came along to Samford to give a little bit of a talk on how fantastic they are and what they're doing to our environment to save us from being killed from little ants. When we, at this meeting that we had, actually said to them, look, we do know you've poisoned our waterways, and that's when they apologised. But they had no intention to apologise to us at that actual meeting until we actually pulled them up and said, this is what you've done. Then they went away for a while, as we all know. The choppers had left, and we thought, okay, it's a bit of a lull before the storm. And then all of a sudden, here they are coming in full force again. Realising that we'd already been to another meeting, and Marnie Manning, who was head of operations at the time, told us that we will not be using pyriproxyfen in the Samford region and greater region because of our mistake. Now, the other day, when one of our residents were actually arrested, we'd realised that in a great waterway through her property, they'd used pyriproxyfen. The lady that got arrested found that in her mailbox. Now, whether they put that in her mailbox prior to them poisoning her land with pyriproxyfen, or they did it after, we're not quite sure. But anyway, they used pyriproxyfen on the land, and again, they keep deceiving us. They keep telling us that they're going to do one thing and then they do another. We've got Jim Wilmot's just arrived. Jim, come up here. Jim's been held up in an accident, and he's come all the way from out west to come and talk to us tonight. Now, Jim Wilmot is one of the most knowledgeable people I've met in a long, long time in regards to so many issues that are happening to us on our land and our environment and so forth. Jim, do you want to come up now? And you're on. Why not?
Nice rain.
Beautiful rain.
Took me 3 hours to get here from the Sunshine Coast. There was a bit of accident on the highway, so
Good drivers.
who's ever seen fire ants before? Put your hand up. Anyone here ever been bitten by a fire ant? Did it hurt?
Not much.
4 out of 10.
4 out of 10, okay. So I started with Natural Resources and Mines Department of Lands back in 1994, and we were involved in invasive species management throughout Queensland. I moved around a lot of places, central Queensland, and then came to Brisbane in a senior policy position. I've always been involved in invasive species management: locusts, mice, rats, weeds, and a bit of fire ants. Yep. So, as you know, I'm going over some old ground here for a lot of people, but they were first detected in Queensland in 2001, fire ants that is, but the word is they've been here for 10, 15 years before that. which is a real worry how something like that could be here for 10 to 15 years before that. Buying shipping containers, they think out of South America. We're not quite sure, in the Port of Brisbane. And even back then, the eradication program was managed by the state government. They had they formed, I remember, it was panic stations because this pest had caused havoc around the world in a lot of places. And they put together a national agreement where the states and territories put in 50% and then the feds put in the other 50% of the money. And remember, that only occurs because it's an eradication program through a national agreement. And since 2001, they've spread from the initial 40,000 hectares, which was quite an area if you think what 40,000 hectares is. It's quite a big area, up to, and it's even spread past 850,000. It's up to about 880,000 hectares. So that's not high density throughout. Some areas, like South Brisbane's very high density in nests. Some areas haven't got hardly any nests at all. The big worry is outside of this main population hub, infestation, is where they are that we don't know about still. Yep. And this is the latest mapping. You see, despite 23 years, and I think it's up to $1.2 billion of taxpayers' money, the net population has not reduced, in fact, it's increased. They've had a good go at it and tried to force it back. But these are really good pests. They're super pests, apparently. And so you see the treatment area, it's basically like they're trying to horseshoe them in, bring them in, like a mob of wild cattle. So you've got that surveillance, that blue line around the outer edge, which is surveillance. That's where they do get out and about, look for them, through a lot of different, like from the air, sniffer dogs, ground inspections, and then you've got that other line, that orangey red line, which is the eradication zone. And that's where they do eradication activities. And then beyond that, you've got the full suppression zone where you've got a combination of high density nest area to the south, and it varies. But that's a massive area. Yep. So where are we out in, this is a new slide you put in here, mate. Well, that's okay. Yeah, that's right, it has grown. And you know why it's grown? Because there's so much movement. There's so much they call vectors. We're a vector for fire ant spread, where we move pot plants around, move soil around, mulch, or when you look at a lot of the housing development where it's occurred, that's where there's a lot of fire ants. They love disturbed area, just like weeds and that. They love where soil's fresh, and that's where you see a lot of fire ants outbreaks. And so you've got a lot of machinery, soil moving around those areas, and that's how it's spread. They've exploded over that time, yep. So this is the most important slide that you'll see tonight. And it's actually called the PECA curve, Prevention, Eradication, Containment and Asset Management. So along the bottom line axis, it's time, and up the side is area occupied. So, and this, you can use this for the management of every invasive species, not just fire ants. Yeah? And there's different graphs, but they're all got the same axis. So, prevention. We should have did everything possible to try and prevent fire ants getting in here before we knew that they would spread across 40,000 hectares. That's how we have as many containers that we try to inspect as possible, as the budget allows. The best return on investment is spending the money in trying to keep the pest out. Trying to keep it out of Australia. That's why we want strong biosecurity systems to not even let it come in. But once it does come in, and you'll see that little green arrow there, then you have an eradication phase. And that is where we throw everything at it. You can imagine everything that we've got in the cupboard, we try and throw at it, because, there's certain activities you do in that eradication period. Like you use all resources possible, you go and try and find, if you find a nest, like you say, well, how did it get there? You do your trace back. What vector Was it spread here by saw, or was it spread here by a person moving a pot plant? Stuff like that. So that is where the state government and all the other states think this program is at. They're still working in that eradication phase after 20 odd years. They're still there. They still think that they can eradicate every single fire ant across 880,000 hectares. That's what they're trying to achieve. And that is why you see a lot of angst in the community, because they're still pushing hard to try and eradicate. But remember, at the moment, they're only eradicating around that outer rim, that 10k wide, I think it is, that outer rim. But in that middle zone, the suppression zone, well, it's pretty ad hoc. I've got a suppression team, but I've seen people wait 6 months. 6 months, I've seen people report and not even get any action. That's what's happening. So then you move into a containment phase. When the pest has moved out and they can't control it, it starts to spread, and I guess the population increases. And as the population increases, the impacts increase. So we move into the containment phase, and they try, and really this is what this program is now, I believe. We're in that containment phase. They're trying to contain it. There's even a map the state government's put out where they've said, well, if we didn't spend all this money, it'd be such a lot more area that's spread and infested. Well, that's true. They have contained the pest after all these years. And then in containment, you really try and stem them in and not let them jump over that area. And remember, the thing about containment, and we've got to accept this in the Brisbane area, is that containment is forever. We will never get rid of fire ants from the southeast corner. We have to accept that as a community. Never been done in the world, and it's never been done. They've tried to. We're good at containing them, but we will never eradicate them. And then when it moves past the containment stage, you get this asset-based protection, and that's where who knows what lantana looks like. Yeah? It's endemic though. So we're never going to eradicate lantana, are we? Yeah. So fire ants aren't there yet. They're not at that stage yet. I still think they're out within that containment, pushing up on the outer edge containment in some areas. Because if they were an endemic, they'd be across Australia. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to let this pest get across Australia. It will have impacts. We're going to do our best we can to contain it. But we've got to be realistic. And that's why I said this is a reality check. That we will never eradicate them. But remember, the funding stops from all the other states and the feds when it is no longer an eradication project. That is why after all these years and that massive spread, they're still calling it an eradication project. It's not, but look, beyond that, they have eradicated fire ants out of this high density zone. Gladstone, Perth, Sydney, there's a few spots down south where they're going hard to eradicate it, over the border, Liddell, Murwillumbah. So it is possible to eradicate fire ants when they're just discovered. Remember back to that graph, the initial let's jump on it. But they were never going to eradicate it, even at the 40,000 hectare stage. They should have stemmed them in hard and tried to contain them. And remember, when you try and contain something, they call it the goose effect in biosecurity, where it can always jump over the containment zone. So you've always got to be ready to jump on it. And that's what we're going to have to do forever. So we're going to have to get used as a community to manage fire ants forever. So the current government-led approach, it is pretty heavy-handed, let's be honest. I've done compliance activities with landowners. I know a guy, this mad guy when I used to live in Minden and work for the Far North Coast County Council. This guy wrote to me and said, well, I'm going to go over, He's a real mad, like, he loves his plants, exotic plants. He was swallowing exotic fruit overseas that was illegal to bring into Australia and bring the seeds through in his stomach, do the business and clean them out. It's true. So I was involved in a project where he got frisk certs at the airport and searched really well. And then we searched his property as well. So because, you know, that's nearly like biological terrorism. Yeah? So there's people out there that do that type of stuff, believe me. So this is why you're seeing a heavy-handed compliance activities that the Department of Primary Industry is handing out, because they still think they're in this eradication program. And really that's leading to disengaging and discontent and fear of reporting. You know, if you're going to be made to treat your property and you don't have much say in what it's treated with, it's all about fines and sections of this, sections of that. Now don't get me wrong, we've all got a biosecurity responsibility. We've all got a role to treat pests and to stop pest spreading. There's a lot of cost shifting to local government and the community as that mass of fire ants starts to spread, and they're trying to hang on to the best they can any form and resemblance of control, because it is a massive job. You imagine 880,000 hectares of ants they're trying to control, and all those different vectors and spread pathways trying to jump and get out and maneuver them. And one of the things I've noticed is they're very disrespectful of private property rights. Your private property. You know, within the bounds of the law, you should be able to do what you want on your private property. And if someone's going to go and treat your place, well, you should have a bit of choice of what they're treating it with, when they're treating it, how they're treating it, or you might want to treat it yourself. And there's slow response times. And a lot of that is poor coordination, poor planning, and it's just because of the massive area as well, they can't get everywhere. There's a lack of transparency. You'll notice when government, and they've done this for as long as I can remember, the state government, they like saying how many tonnes of bait they've put out, how many inspections they've done, how many properties they've inspected. They like talking about outputs, but they never talk about the percentage gained towards eradication, do they? No. How quick, what measurement, what report are they giving us of how they're going in achieving that eradication goal back to the Becker curve? Because it's easy to report on outputs, and it sounds really good. So many properties inspected, so many tonnes of bait used, we're doing great things. But we really don't know how they're going and progressing towards eradication. So that lack of transparency. And like, if you think of it, in reality, it's a containment program. We should have some more choice, because when you look at the community, there's people in every community, and I found this myself with biosecurity all my life, that people that don't mind what chemicals used on their place, as long as you kill that damn pest, you just get in and kill it. But there's people that want to do things naturally and use natural products, and that's okay too. And when a pest gets to this stage, you should have those options, and those options are out there. Look at, where's Trevor Hop? Here's Trev. Look at that big flash machine he's got. What do you call that machine, Trev?
Fire ant soup maker.
Fire ant soup maker, turns her into soup. And that's proven technology overseas too. It's backed up by what university is it, Trev?
University of Florida.
So it's not just something Trev's dreamed up, it actually works and can give an alternative treatment option for people who don't want chemical use. Yep. So in the biosecurity field, one of the principles of biosecurity is you've got to collaborate with the community. You've got to build ownership of the community to that pest issue. Yeah? You've got to bring the community with you. And the department hasn't done a bad job in some respects, but in other respects they've let you down. Community-led and community-driven syndicates are grassroots initiatives where the communities take the lead in managing the pest. You leverage local knowledge, resources, the networks, and it's culturally sensitive. It takes note, well, if you don't want to use full-on toxic chemical or chemical, you might want to use a natural alternative where you can. It takes in that spectrum, which it should. Yep. This is a flash diagram I did up trying to kind of visualise what it is. So in a community-led program, you've got, and before I go on to this flash diagram, there's syndicates already established for other pest species that have worked. Some syndicates have worked for over 100 years where the community is driven. And that's for, wild dog syndicates out west, the control of wild dogs. You've got syndicates for the control of locusts. You've got syndicates for the control of weeds, for feral pigs. It's nothing new in the field of biosecurity and pest management generally. So you've got state government takes a little bit of step back, but they're still involved because they're like the Chief Executive Officer of Biosecurity in Queensland. So they've got oversight and they give resources to local governments. Because local governments have these things called under the Act, a biosecurity management plan. They've got a responsibility and obligation to manage declared animal and plant species that are declared under the Biosecurity Act. And on the right side, you've got local community takes the lead for the management on private properties. On your own land, you take the lead for managing fire ants on your own land. Just like you would with lantana, fireweed, and the other pests. Down this side, you've got local government on the right, down the bottom. And local governments are the closest level of government to the people, yeah? And so, you usually have a lot of interface with your local government. So in the syndicates I've seen, they provide a lot of support, like administration support, a lot of data support. They might even try and coordinate some of the local pest controllers for you. And then you've got management services, so provision of treatment, like you might have someone like with tregs set up, or you might have professional pest controllers that you can call on in the syndicate. Because not everyone has the time to go and do their own fire ants, do they? So they can call on a management service, a provision of treatment for control. And so really that sweet spot in the middle is where you want to be, is where the community feels engaged and there's collaboration with all those other stakeholders. So you don't feel that real top-down approach from government, do it this way or we're going to arrest you. Do it this way or we're going to give you a $14,000 fine. That type of stuff. So it takes that load off. But remember, the state government still thinks it's an eradication project. We've got to convince them that it's not an eradication project, it's a containment project. And we need them to look at trialling these syndicates as a start. So the model, representation is dominated by community members, and I'm just going on what other syndicates that I've seen around Australia are. Local government usually provides admin, coordination and logistical support. State provides funding directly to local governments in line with their biosecurity plans. So some biosecurity plans under local governments I've seen have syndicates attached to them. It might be for wild dogs, might be for rabbits, might be for pigs, might be for certain weeds. It can be for fire ants as well in certain areas. State and local governments are responsible for the management of their own lands, and so they should be. Our highways, our schools, our roadways, local, state, our parks, local government, state government should be. It's their land, they're responsible for it, get in and do it. Yep. So what's the benefits of a syndicate? What I've seen, a lot of people in the community look out for each other. If the community's connected, they know what's going on. You've got that informal community network that happens with your mate, so-and-so knows so-and-so, mate's got fire ants over there, he's done a good job. And that's what really drives increased participation and ownership is the key for the management of any pest species. People feel more connected to the outcomes instead of government doing all the work. Government are pretty inefficient. Have you noticed that? They are. To me, it's a libertarian coming where it is. I think we've got a bit too much government at the moment. Getting in the way, telling us what to do, what to say. I won't go down that path. to the outcomes in their community, they are more likely to stay engaged and maintain control with the measures over the long time, because that's what we want. Because remember, back to that invasion curve, containment is forever. So we've got to set ourselves up with mechanisms where we keep on suppressing fire ants forever. And that's why we've got to start doing this, because we've got to work out the right mechanism of how we're going to manage fire ants so they don't take over our lives and start to really impact our lives. Yeah? And so we've got to get ready to do it. We should be practicing how to do this now, because they're not going to go away. We've got to keep suppressing them. Yep. Cost efficiency, like I said before, I think in a lot of areas the community can do it a lot cheaper than what the government does it. There's better coordination, like look at some of the tree care groups, the land care groups that do a lot of environmental work. In a way, there's a lot of good community groups, Lions, Rotary. The community is networked across a lot of things. We've got SES groups, rural bushfire brigades, all that kind of stuff. We know how to do stuff. The community knows how to lead and do best. Yep. Social cohesion, so people not everyone has got the time to be involved. I'm not saying everyone has to, but you might want to be involved, and you might say, well, my place, it's great that you've got a syndicate, I work full time, I'm just going to get a pest controller in, but it's part of the program that the syndicate's involved in. So people have varying degrees. The regulations, there's going to be less compliance. You're going to save the government money. So they're not having coppers coming around and arresting people or threatening you with bits of paper. You're going to feel that you're more in control. Yep. It's adaptable and flexible. It's more flexible than the bloated bureaucracies we find ourselves with in Queensland at this time. They can quickly adapt. Like imagine if you know, I don't know this area very well, like Samford Creek, you might have a flood, and you might have an increased spread of fire ants that little buggers grab together and they float along on rafts, and they might come into a new area which has been treated by the city before. Well, you can rearrange and get to that and treat it as a community quicker, or get pest controllers in, get someone like. Again, it doesn't have to be chemical. There are effective ways to treat isolated nests. Yep. Oh, sorry, could you just go back? I've just missed one. Yeah, so ecologically sound solutions. So community members are more often motivated to use environmentally friendly and sustainable methods of pest control to protect local biodiversity. You just think of the amount of chemical that's being put on land that's treated 6 times every 2 years over the last 20 odd years. In a lot of chemical, hey? Sure, 1 or 2 treatments might have an impact, but when you're doing it 20 years, no matter how small the toxicity of that chemical is, it's going to have some impact. And no one's done a study of what that's going to look like after 20 years. So we should try and that back to that Pecker curve, that's where eradication is so important. I don't mind using chemical if it's to eradicate something and you don't have to use much, but the more a pest spreads, yes, you've got to use so much more chemical. So look at the amount of chemical they're using, because they've got to look 880,000 hectares, mate. That's a lot. So the time for that mass chemical use is, it's out, it's gone, that window's closed, because the pest spreads so far. For government to do it out of the air and everything. That's not to say I don't agree with a real jump on everything outside the containment zone, like the stuff they found at North Arm and that. We should be jumping on that quickly, because that's a new area. We have got the potential to eradicate that. Yep. Knowledge sharing and capacity building. The more we use syndicates, the more we can share what works and what doesn't work. What works over here might work over there. You've got different landholders, you've got different types of properties, different terrains. We'll build up that expertise over the years through the syndicate developments to actually get more best practice. That's what we're going to need. Improved monitoring and early detection. So in a community, you'll know more about where the pests are, because you can have data sets that local government can provide. If you feed information in, local governments can provide you that information. It does work with other syndicates that I've been involved in. They have really good mapping. You'll know exactly where the pests are, the fire ants are, and aren't in the Samford area if you've got good active community syndicates. Yep. So the benefits again, it's grassroots approach, not top down. People in Australia are just sick of the top down authority, and they want to have more control of what's going in their lives every day. It's collaborative, so we're still working with the state. We still love you guys. We're still working with the local governments because they're our local governments. You know, we interact with them every day. But it puts the community more in control, because a lot of people in the community don't feel that much ownership at the moment. Engagement, ownership and empowerment. This is a big one. It respects individual differences. And that's what's not going on now. And it respects your property rights. Because it's your property. That's what you worked for all your life. That's the legacy you want to leave your kids. You should have more control and more say what happens on your property, yeah? Yep. Unfortunately, there's some challenges. Political leadership to adopt a more collaborative, community-driven model rather than a top-down approach. We've got to get those in power to accept that, to even look and trial different models, rather than we're just going to keep what we're doing for the last 20 odd years. State government provision of program dollars to local government and communities. State government likes hanging on to the money. Money is power. They don't like giving it to communities and local governments. There has been some local governments that have complained already. They get responsibility from the state government, but they don't get any of this with it. That stays with the state. So there's got to be some letting go of funding to give it to community syndicates and local government. This is a big one. Acceptance by authorities that focus of the program is one of ongoing containment and suppression, not eradication. To move them out of that eradication phase to one of containment. That's a really big one. Because, you know, they like using the eradication word, don't they? Every second word they talk about the new eradication, because it sounds fancy. It sounds like they're going to win. Well, I'm here to say you're not going to eradicate fire ants. And it's not just me saying it, there is a heap of other experts saying the same thing. It's politically dangerous to admit failure though, but it's time they admit that they need a different approach. We've got to set ourselves up for the long-term management of fire ants. Yep. So that's it. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Jim. So I want you to know that Jim Wilmot is actually a biosecurity officer and does know biosecurity. So everything he has, all that information he has just given you is actual fact, and it's amazing. Jim's also a Libertarian candidate for the Senate and set up Property Rights Australia. Now that is a very important thing that you need to take away with you. Property rights. We're not here to talk about it tonight, but if you ever have any questions about your property rights, feel free to call Jim Wilmot, because he will embrace you with everything you need to know in regard to it. Our next speaker tonight is Trevor Holt. Trevor's got some amazing stuff to tell us. He puts his hard yards in. He has been fighting this sham for a long time, and we're very grateful to him. Thank you.
Yeah, hey guys. Thanks for the opportunity, sir, and wanting me to have a few words. I'm surprised it's 2025 in Queensland, Australia, and my human rights are not guaranteed. My property rights are not mandated, and I'm being coerced by government officials to do stuff that I don't want to do, get treatment on my property. So And that's the reality for all of us. All of us are in the same boat. Even though Queensland has a Human Rights Act, there's nothing that mandates that the government has to give us our rights. And they have deemed that fire ants is enough reason, the eradication of fire ants is enough reason to deny our fundamental human rights and property rights. Specifically privacy is a big one. I think Sarah said it before, especially among women in the population. It seems to be quite targeted. So what I've done is everything in my power to try and remedy this situation. One of the first things I did was reach out to experts because I'm no expert on fire ants. I didn't know anything about fire ants. I'm just a simple guy doing a Bachelor of Psychology. So looking back at home, living my life, before I got dragged into this, Sarah had a picture there that 2 of my calves had died as a direct result of this program from their parents being excessively exposed to these toxic chemicals, and the bioaccumulation in them harmed the fetus and embryo development of 2 of these calves, and they'll be euthanized at 6 weeks old. So that's how I got involved in this campaign, and the more I communicated with the program and the more I learned about the program, the more concerns I had. So I brought it on myself, and I thought the biggest problem was there was no alternative to chemical solutions. The program didn't recognise anything that wasn't chemical. They had their chemical solutions, and that was it. So I reached out and I just Googled it, and Dr. Joshua King had a $100,000 US government grant that he got given for brilliant work on this payment design for hot water treatment method. So I reached out to Josh and I said, Josh, can you help me? I want to build your machine here in Australia to demonstrate to the Australian government that there are alternatives that can work, and I want to use your machine and set it up here. So we had a few meetings and had a few discussions, and I spent a lot of my partners' money, I suppose, on a trailer. It's got a big furnace on the back to make hot water. So it was about a $30,000 investment, and specifications were provided by Dr. Josh King. We had to retrofit out because it's hot water, 90 to 95 degrees, continuous flow, and low pressure design, which is not very common in Australian manufacturing. It's not a very common application. Obviously, a lot of applications have a high flow thing. So we had to retrofit out something that was existing here already. We swapped a few things around, put a bypass valve on it, changed the pressure switch to a flow switch, and we had to change a few things to get the specifications. But we ended up with this hot water machine. And talking to Josh about what's going on here in Australia, I said, look, this is what's going on. And he says, oh no, that wouldn't be going on. I said, no, they're prophylatically treating 850,000 hectares of, no, they wouldn't be doing that. Have you got any proof they're doing that? And I said, yeah. And I gave him the link to the website. And then a few days later, he wrote an open letter of concern. And if we go, sorry, just keep going. Yeah. Sorry, keep going. Yeah, so Dr. Joshua King's open letter of concern had a few, and I've got a copy here if anyone wants it. I'll print out a heap of copies. But basically, the duration, and as Jim's already suggested, the duration of the fire ants in southeast Queensland and the distribution of them in southeast Queensland is impossible to eradicate. So, and that's what Jim sort of said, that it been here that long and over such a diverse area that it's impossible to eradicate, and that's the experience around the world. He says it's not anecdotal, it's fact, and he's quite candid about that. But the repeated excessive exposure to the chemicals creates resistance. You heard Connie talk about this a bit. But that's not the only problem that Dr. King talks about as well. He also talks about a phenomenon called bait shyness. So fire ants actually learn not to take the bait back to their queen. So not only can they develop a resistance, as Connie says, but they also, there's a phenomenon where they don't want to kill their queen and they just ignore the bait. So they do that as well. And obviously too, the non-target species adverse effects. And Connie talked about that too, about the native ants being the best form of protection moving forward. But only having chemical solutions to what they're doing in their approach, it exasperates all them other issues. Because obviously, if you had hot water treatment every now and again, or managing the sensitive areas along the creek, so that would prevent the creek from being poisoned, for example, or not putting fipronil on where the kids are playing soccer is probably ideal, but so having a diverse approach will help with immunity and the resistance to the chemicals and the bait shyness and all that sort of stuff. So so go to the next one, Sarah. So it's painted, obviously in the United States, it's a patented machine. So basically, what happens, we've got a couple of minutes. No, we haven't, we're going to keep going. Okay, yeah. So just a painted, already painted, licensed through the University of Florida, so I've got a license there for it. And I'm in contact with Dr. Joshua King quite regularly, talking about it and treating fire ants. So in addition, it's actually licensed through Australian Advocacy Group. I set up Australian Advocacy Group, and I've got my own key performance indicators. Obviously, we want everyone that gets notice to object to them. So that's the number one thing. So I set up objection at aagpilot.com. The program denies everything, so we don't believe they're very transparent. So by CCing or BCCing objection at AAG, then that way I've got a copy of everyone's objections, but they can't lie about how many there are. I've got a website you can subscribe to, so when we do an article or we want to get teams of people together at a property, I can email everyone, so by subscribing to that. Then obviously there's financial members of AAG, people that are contributing to the campaign. We've got billboards, there's 3 billboards around, one at Minden, one at towards Toowoomba and one at there somewhere. But and we've done the aerial flights, sky signs, we've done a few of them, so, and then individual service agreements. So AAG is just empowering communities with information to make informed decisions. It's a unique social network of individuals, commercial businesses, charities and other entities of a similar Australian beliefs and values, providing a platform of social advocacy. And that's what it is. We've got to enjoy the journey. We can't focus too much on individual results. It's just an everyday journey, and it's just a social thing where people, members are trying to create change, initiate change in the government and move away from this reckless prophylactic treatment. So the current campaign is about, as everyone says, recognising fire ants eradication is impossible, ending prophylactic distribution of toxic chemicals, utilising direct nest treatments, actually treat fire ant nests, that's what we're campaigning for, providing alternatives to chemical treatment for managing fire ants, where Sarah's ideas come in before, plus a hot water machine, subsidies for private property holders to utilise is approved. At the moment there's only subsidies for the chemicals that they're offering, utilising alternatives to manage fire ants, placing more weight on individual rights. We're seeing COVID Senate inquiry that not enough weight was put on human rights. I feel that's happening now as well with this. They haven't learnt their lesson. As Jim says too, respecting private property rights and individual choice. Some people won't report fire ants because they don't want the chemical treatment. So it's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? And just utilising community and these people here and using a lot of voices to initiate change. I've written thousands of letters to all the members of Parliament, federal, state and local. It's not going to work now anyway. We're going to put pressure on this through people power, through all you guys speaking up, and hopefully in the Senate with guys like Malcolm talking out for us and this like that. But people power is the only way forward, guys. Yeah, so that's all. And anyone wants any questions about the machine or anything, just come to us.
Next, we have Hugh Carter, who is a legal counsellor. Hugh stepped in because our lawyer that we had come couldn't make it. So we really appreciate it, Hugh, if you'd like to come up and have a real chat to us in regards to the legal. Thank you very much.
Kind of invited to do this in short notice, but I'm glad it was. And I'd like to firstly thank everybody for attending. And this is a really, really important issue that I became involved in not long after Dawson Creek was contaminated by aerial bombing of the chemicals, nasty little red granular, green yellow granules. They were all over the rocks, fill up all the native life, and it's just astounding how just appalling people can be. And knowing exactly what they were doing, they ultimately said it was an accident. I feel like it is. All right, look, I'm here as a lawyer. I better talk to you like a lawyer. Yeah, how's that? Better? All right, I'll park it on my chin. There you go. It's too terrible on the voice. All right, now, we've been approaching this from a political perspective. I've worked as an advisor for Senator Roberts. I've been doing that for 6 years now, and it's a wonderful job. It gets me to do things which I can really get my teeth into. We had planned to ask questions about the fire ant programs and the eradication program directly to those responsible, the Australian Pesticides, Veterinary Medical Authority, who are the ones who put out the permits, supposedly have done all that research, and also to the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and such, to actually put them on the spot as well as what they were doing. I haven't got a lot of time to speak with you, so I'm going to actually do something slightly different. I'm going to point out a couple of the significant problems from a legal perspective that are going on, and then I'm going to actually swing across and say how you might respond if these people descend on you. One of the things that the legislation says is that you can, in fact, obstruct somebody coming onto your property with a view to applying these chemicals if you have a reasonable excuse. What is a reasonable excuse has not yet been publicly said by any of these authorities. They're trying to leave it up to their own officers who have very little training, very little understanding. They're under orders to basically get this stuff out there, and they're not listening very carefully to what people are saying back to them. So let's just quickly have a look at the permits, because Connie was very good at pointing out some of the basic problems already within that. The first restraint in permit number PER 87728, that's the one that deals with pyriproxyfen. It says, do not apply as a preventative for red imported fire ant control. Well, it seems a bit, straightforward, doesn't it? Preventative. They're not trying to say as a killer, to bump them all off. They're saying as a preventative. Well,
This being the case, why has it been widespread by aerial and ground application to properties where there's no fire ant activity? Or it's been identified by persons from the National Fire Ant Eradication Program in breach of the permit. That would seem to me to be a pretty reasonable excuse. Do you think so? Well, that's one that I suggest you keep in mind. What Australian research has been done in relation to the effects of the chemical on humans? Well, none at all as far as I know, and I think they're trying to rely on some international stuff, but there's been absolutely nothing done in Australia that one can easily, quickly point to say it is safe and effective. Because that's what they love to use. The first restraint in permit number PER 90213 relates to the usage of S-methoprene. It says, do not apply where fire ant populations are not evident or no longer evident. So even if they've been there and gone, you shouldn't use it again. Now that being the case, why are persons from the National Fire Ant Eradication Program insistent on applying the chemical multiple times on properties where no fire ant activity has been seen or is evident? And that's in breach of the permit. If they're going to do that, that would seem to be a pretty reasonable excuse. Please note that down. Now, they say in relation to S-methoprene that you shouldn't allow or use it when it's not possible for poultry to have direct access to the baits. Does that mean, is it a poison to bird life? What about our native birds? All the environmental protection people? Oh my God, where are the Greens? All that was a bit of a political shove-up, wasn't it? All right, but nobody's talking about that. And the threats to our native life. If it's going to bump off fire ants, it's already bumping off all the other insects as well, which are part of the food chain for small animals and birds, stuff like that. Like me, I suspect you all actually do have some concerns. You don't want them to all just go and die. So we do have a role in protecting the environment, and that includes them as well. Now, I'm confused. This permit, the one that I'm just talking about in S-methoprene, I'm confused because on one hand it says that treatment may be applied into waterways up to 1.5 metres from each bank, that means in the water. Yet at the same permit it states the chemical is, quote, very toxic to aquatic life. Are they stupid? In their own permit? Do you think that looks a bit silly? Well, when something is as inconsistent as that, that sounds like a very reasonable excuse to me. And certainly, as Connie said, no Australian environmental impact study that we can point out to indicate that it's so effective. All right, so we were also going to ask some questions. Basically, my questions, or the questions that Malcolm was going to ask, Senator, asked in relation to the Australian pesticides guys. We also had some questions we were shaping up to ask in relation to DAF as well. That's the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry. We were going to ask them what their overview was. Why are they using intimidating and overreach tactics? Since when is it okay for gates and fences to be broken down with police presence, threatening those even with reasonable excuses, who withhold consent to strangers forcing their way onto their properties, for few to spread poison when there's not a fire ant within Cooree? And that's exactly what happened. It's happening all over the place. Now, as I said, a property owner can obstruct and refuse access to officers if they have a reasonable excuse. This is a burning question. Now, to work out what a reasonable excuse is, generally, the test of law is simply to put that question to reasonable, ordinary people, and what would that person think? Would that be a reasonable excuse? So, you heard it first here. These are the sorts of questions we would put to the organisation, the DAF, the department who has the responsibility for overview of all this. These are the sort of things, and I'll put it to you. And nice loud responses, please. Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals represent a threat to domestic animals, dogs, cats and birds if they're exposed to toxic chemicals?
Yes!
Absolutely.
Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals represent a threat to poultry, livestock, fruit and veg growing on the property?
Yes!
Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals are not being administered according to the safety requirements under the permits?
Yes!
Why is aerial application of the pyriproxyfen occurring on a wide scale on areas where there's no fire ants have been identified? And the permit says, do not apply as a preventative measure for red imported fire ants. Is that a reasonable excuse?
Yes!
Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the administering authority has already disastrously polluted a significant waterway in the Samford Valley near Brisbane, killing extensive native marine, reptile and insect species?
Yes!
And I know that's true because I was there and saw it. So is the Senator, by the way. Is it a reasonable excuse to obstruct when the chemicals have already been shown to not discriminate between insects and have already wiped out thousands of domestic and native bees and their hives?
Yes!
Yes.
All right, you don't have to respond now. I think I've got the point. No environmental safety in relation to humans. Who's responsible for what constitutes a reasonable excuse? And really, the best answer to that is it should be by a court. Not some busy little public servant. And we know that money is the root of all evil. Will DAF step up to pay compensation to those affected by the misapplication of the fire ant eradication program?
Yeah,
That's what needs to happen.
that's what
If
needs to
anyone
happen.
wants to actually talk about these things, we'll be around for a bit after all of this, and anybody can make contact with the office and come and see me, and I'll give you a phone number. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't like politicians very much. And I've been working for one for nearly 6 years. I had never, ever considered working in the area of politics before that. I'm a barrister, I still am. I still hold my practicing certificate, and I've had that since 1985. So if you do maths, it's actually a while. I've worked as a lawyer very closely in what's called the protective jurisdiction. That basically means I've worked assisting for 30 years, assisting vulnerable people in the community. People with intellectual disabilities, their families, people with mental illness and their families. And I did that until I had a cup of coffee. This fella over here, Senator Malcolm Roberts, he said, I'd actually like to have a chat with you, Hugh. Somebody said that you've been doing good work. I said I didn't like politicians. That's still pretty close, with one specific exception. I really like Senator Malcolm Roberts. And he was very, very worthy of support in the coming federal election.
Yes.
Thank you. Malcolm Roberts.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Malcolm, would you like to come and have a few words, please? I've got a fair bit of energy moving around my shoulders. Can you hear me?
Hold it now.
I've got a fair bit of energy moving around my right shoulder. I've been practicing meditation for about 24 years, and every now and then bits and pieces of energy start moving, so I'll just use the microphone like this. First of all, I want to congratulate everyone involved. Everyone. Look at the people. Sarah, Connie, Trevor, Hunter's here from Boona area. He's done fabulous work. We've been to Gatton, Boona, Currumbin, Samford. This is a common problem right across the southeast. We've also met with Ven, Brett, and the teamwork evident is quite phenomenal. We sat down with Ven's coffee. He gave us coffee and lunch actually before we came out to Dawson Creek. Really wonderful team. This is a professional outfit who are working for nothing. They're very, very good, and they're working right across. We've got Pam down in the Gold Coast. We've got Gary Duffy, married to Connie Turney. We've got, well, what is the main, we've also had Jim now. Jim's fabulous on biodiversity, he really is. He's been working with us for some time. This issue is not about red ants. This issue is about democracy and saving our country. I can tell you that now. The common threads are right through it. And it's also about our children. That's what it's about, the future of our children. And it's about, as Jim pointed out, and other speakers have pointed out, about property rights. And property rights are fundamental to enterprise, to human progress, and to a free enterprise. I've seen people in 4 or 5 different groups now have been involved with fire ants, from the first one at Gatton, which was probably about 2016, 2017. People have got a variety of feelings. Some are feeling angry, feeling frustrated, feeling depressed, mental health problems, as Trevor keeps pointing out. Some are feeling excited because they're getting ready for battle. But some are feeling frustrated and hopeless. This is overwhelming for so many people because it's basically based on bullshit. And it's hard to fight bullshit. The needs that people are talking about and are needing: safety, health, mental health, property rights, security. They also want justice, honesty and truth, and they're not getting that from the state and federal governments. I'll get on to what we've been doing later. It's failed. I don't need to go through the history now from 2001 and 15 years earlier than that. It's failed from one fire ant nest to now over 2,000, as I understand it. And it's now encompassing a far greater area. It has completely failed. What's more, I've been asking people, what is the danger of fire ants? I can't find any. How many people have died from fire ants, Jim?
Racing up to 0.
I've only heard one problem with fire ants. Some lambs were inconvenienced. But the other thing I want people to see is not just democracy and property rights, it's also care. These people are caring. And what I've seen time and time again, I used to be one myself, working voluntarily to fight a government over a government lie. Spending your money, billions of dollars of our money, to hoodwink us, and we have to do that for free as volunteers. These people are all volunteers. As I said, we've been chasing this issue for several years now. Gatton, Boona, Currumbin, Samford. I'll give you a little taste of what happened at the first one I went to, Gatton. The people from the state government came and said, we want you to go to the 3 booths at the back. There are tables set up. You can ask all the questions you want. We said, no. We want the forum. That's what we want. They said, you can't have a forum. The booths are here set up. They did not want a discussion of what are they afraid. They did not want a discussion. We stood up and we debated with them and got a discussion and an open forum, and they did not like it. This is about control. This is a very serious issue. It's about the environment, human health, including mental health, property rights, governance. I've been to Dawson Creek and saw the damage there firsthand. It's also about protecting the law, because these people seem to be above the law, the people pushing this. Time and time again we see this coming up. Let's kill the environment to protect the planet. That's what they're doing. They're doing it in the name of the environment without a real threat. We've done letters to state and federal ministers. We've had questions in Senate estimates that Hugh prepared. but the Albanese government called off Senate estimates after just one day. It's supposed to be 10 days. We've done speeches, we've done rallies, we've had you go to advise people, we've been in an inquiry and asked questions of witnesses in an inquiry. This is a state issue, but we have been using our federal influence to try and help. Fundamental to all of this, there's a massive conflict of interest. There is a conflict of interest because, as we understand it, we've been told, I think Sarah's got the details on this, the husband of a state member of parliament has the contract for dispersing the chemicals. He also, as I understand it, has a contract for supplying the chemicals. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to apologise, but that's what I understand, and these people have done their research. And there are no ants in Samford Valley, but they're getting paid to spread this toxin. This is all about, like so many other issues facing governments in this country, this is about control, property rights, and wealth transfer. Transfer from you to the people pushing this treatment. We have a perfect solution: self-treatment. And self-treatment brings responsibility with citizens. When it's imposed, as Jim kept talking about, imposed over the top of people, it is hideous and ineffective. When it's self-treatment, people take responsibility. And responsibility is a magic word. This is about democracy, and democracy thrives on responsibility. The key problem here is governance, shoddy governance, repeatedly at state and federal level. Governments are